Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another episode of College Football Pros. I am your host, as always, Nick Valinchak, and I am joined today by Drew Van Jura. Yesterday we talked to you a little bit about the Mid-American Conference Eastern Division. Today we look to the West. Drew, are you excited about talking about the MAC West today?
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about some action going on and talk about these teams that a lot of people probably don't know a lot about, but we're going to educate them.
Yeah, we're going to try our best because we're passionate about a lot of these smaller conferences, the Sun Belt, the MAC, the Conference USA. So we're really excited to be able to provide some insight because there's not a lot of other podcasts or even news networks outside of the schools themselves that are really trying to push these conferences out there. So we're really excited. We did a pretty good recap, I think, of the MAC East yesterday, so it only seems natural to move to the MAC West today. And I think, dollar for dollar, the MAC West is a little bit stronger overall. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I think when you look top to bottom, I think the MAC East is top-heavy with Bowling Green and UMass. I think Akron and Ohio in the East have a chance. But I think if you look at the West, you look at Toledo, Northern Illinois, Western Michigan, and Central Michigan, and Ball State, and I think all five of those teams, have a chance to really take this conference all the way.
Yeah, so without further ado, we'll start today with Ball State. In 2014, they had the 80th ranked passing offense, the 78th ranked rushing offense, the 95th ranked overall offense, the 85th ranked passing defense, the 90th ranked rushing defense, the 88th ranked overall defense. They scored 27.7 points per game, and they allowed 27.2. So just by looking at the statistics, this seems like a very mundane team.
Yeah, and I think the thing that stands out to me, and I know you love tight ends, but they return their top three tight ends. And I think when you're leading off a team preview with tight ends, that doesn't bode well for the rest of the team.
No, at one point, Ball State was a powerhouse with Keith Wenning and Willie Snead. They were really, really exciting to watch, and every team's going to go through those ebbs and flows where they're very strong, and then for a couple years, it just seems like they're, just kicking around dirt and just going through the motions, and I feel like that's where the Ball State program is at. Even this year, they bring back all five starters on the offensive line, but then they lose, the all-time record holder in rushing yards at that school, Jawan Edwards, so that's tough. That's a huge, huge shoes to fill.
Yeah, and I don't know, running back-wise, could be by committee. And possibly Teddy Williamson might lead that team, start the season, but offensive production-wise is gonna take a step back.
Yeah, and I don't want to be insulting to freshmen when I say this, but when I look at a depth chart and I see the freshmen or redshirt freshmen starting, I never get the greatest feeling about that program. There's been strong freshman seasons, but they're few and far between.
Yeah, I was going to say, not unless they're, Braxton Miller as a freshman coming in here. I don't see a Braxton Miller on this team.
No, their quarterback is Jack Milas, and he's back. Statistically, last year he was 55% completion rate. His TD to interception ratio was basically 2-1. It's not awful, but it's certainly not what you desire in your starting quarterback.
Yeah, and looking on the defensive side of the ball too, injuries, inexperience, and depth issues lead me to believe that this might be a very, very statistically bad defense.
Well, so let me take it one step further. Texas A&M, Toledo, Northern Illinois, Massachusetts, Western Michigan, and Bowling Green.
Yeah.
Yep, that does not bode well for their defense at all.
No.
All of those teams could put up 400 to 500 yards easily. Easily. So This is going to be a really, really, really tough year. I expect them to perform pretty poorly on defense. Not really sure where the points are going to be scored at. They do have some good players in Jordan Williams and Kayvon Mabin coming back, but I don't know. I'm just not. I think maybe 14, 16 scores between both of them, and that might be 95% of the passing offense.
Yeah, this team it's like we said, the production level on offense and defense is going to be at the bottom of the pile on a lot of stat categories.
Yeah, I'm thinking they're an early target for me, looking at the teams that they're going to be playing, because I'd have to imagine that if I get rattled around 2 or 3 times, my motivation is going to get shot pretty quickly. And knowing that you still have to play 3 strong teams, and who knows what the other ones on the schedule, you don't know how they could develop as the year goes along. So yeah, it's dark times ahead from my perspective for Ball So Hard State. That's the college they're referring to when they say that, right? You know, on like the NFL, when they're doing their introductions, and some of them will be like so-and-so from Ball So Hard University. It's Ball State, right?
I don't know. I don't believe so, but I could be very wrong.
No, it's not. I'm just kind of being a jerk.
Okay, I really didn't know we were going
Which is why you couldn't tell, because I'm such a jerk normally that it just it flows so smoothly.
It worked.
But I digress. On to Central Michigan, who in 2014 had the 53rd ranked passing offense, the 76th ranked rushing offense, the 70th ranked overall offense, the 74th ranked passing defense, the 21st ranked rushing defense, the 30th ranked overall defense. They scored 26.9 points per game, and they allowed 25.2. So right off the bat, when I look at those statistics, I definitely see for this team to be successful, there needs to be a widening of that gap.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the person that's going to lead that is Cooper Rush. I mean, this is a guy that threw 7 touchdowns in their bowl game last year in the Bahamas Bowl. So if he can, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to duplicate that every time, but he's a guy that has a talent to do it. So I think he's going to be a quarterback to look at for the good majority of the season.
So my problem with this whole scenario is that he's losing Titus Davis, which was definitely his top target by a long shot. Thomas Rawls, even though he didn't consistently stay on the field last year, has departed, and he's a Seattle Seahawk now, and I actually drafted him with my last pick in a dynasty league. But he's going to be gone, obviously, so there's a lot of production to be made up, and the only position I can really isolate who it could be is at running back, and there's 2 players, Devin Spalding and Sailor Lavalley, and both of them had time at the running back position last year. I believe Spalding did a little better with the time he was given, so I think he's going to be given the first crack in this offense to kind of set the tone and make the mark. But I still think Lavalley will be given his as well. I just think we're looking probably like 75 to 25. At the receiving position, other than Jason Kroll, who's not the talent level of Titus Davis, I'm just not sure what they have there. And I think that Rush could end up throwing for 3,000 yards, and it's going to be the most awkward division of yards potentially in all of football next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Kroll is going to be a guy that really stands out, moving forward. I really do.
Yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, they actually had one of the better defenses in the country. I mean, they had a top 20% defense. I think the defensive line looks good, maybe even a little better than last year, but the linebacker and defensive back units are going to take a step down, so I think it's going to be a little bit easier to pass against this team, and that's not a good situation considering the emergence of good passers. I mean, for lack of better terms, you've got a lot of guys from Drew Hare, who is known to run more than he passes, but he's still got an arm. You have Zach Terrell. On the other side, you have Matt Johnson. I'm not sure. I don't have their schedule right in front of me, but that's with weakening of defensive backs and being more susceptible to the pass in a conference that has some good quarterbacks. I mean, that puts me in a position where I think that they may not be able to, grow that margin enough to really be a successful team.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they have the best defensive line, in my opinion, in the MAC, that might help that defensive backfield. But they're not going to get to the quarterback every play. So the defensive backfield, the linebackers have to step up. And yeah, I agree with what you said about the quarterbacks in the MAC. This is an up and coming, a lot of young individuals and a lot of good individuals, and even the veteran guys can really sling it. So it might be a problem for them.
Yeah, so I would definitely consider just circling the Central Michigan name and just kind of putting a note to it that this could develop into a great team to target with opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers as the year goes on. Speaking of another team that's good to target everything against, we will move on to Eastern Michigan, which, if you've ever heard someone refer to something as a dumpster fire, they probably watched Eastern Michigan football last year, because they were 117th in the nation in passing offense, 99th in rushing offense, 5th worst in overall offense, 10th worst in passing defense, 116th in rushing defense, 8th worst in overall defense. They scored the 3rd fewest points with 15.2 per game, and they allowed the 4th most points with 40.9. That's awful.
Yeah, they only forced 12 turnovers. I don't understand how that's even possible in D1 football. However, I think their only shining light is quarterback Reginald Bell. He's a dual threat guy that can run and pass. However, if he is your only offensive weapon, the defense knows that, and the defensive coordinator knows that, and he will scheme against it.
Yeah, we've done enough of these preview episodes and looked at the notes, at least, that we've seen that a team might have a really poor offense, or they might be really bad at covering the pass, and they might be bad as an overall defense. But we've yet to see a team that is basically 100 or worse in every single category that we cover. But there's Eastern Michigan, and they're right there.
Yeah, whoever they're playing stacked that other team.
I mean, that's not even a joke. You're giving up 40.9 points a game, so that is, in most scenarios, 6 touchdowns with an extra point. So that means that running back might have 4. There's 24 points right away. There's just, there's an insane amount of production that Eastern Michigan is going to allow to happen. And I hear your point on Reginald Bell, and at first glance, I was like, yeah, I like him. I think it's going to be a good position. But he had maybe 1.5 good games last year where he, eclipsed his value. But the team is just so bad, just so bad, that it makes me believe that no matter how much he's improved, it's just going to be an uphill battle to really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said about a dumpster fire, stay away from this team. Fantasy-wise, on offense and on defense, stack them on the other side of the ball. So I don't know. This team has a lot of holes. Yeah,
the defense I still see giving up 40-some points a game. And mind you, they're going to face probably at least 4 other MAC schools that are offensively challenged, which will probably score like 20 points. So that means that most of the other games, they're going to be giving up in excess of 50 points. So you're going to see a lot of crooked numbers on the opposing team's scorecard. There's no question.
If you're an Eastern Michigan fan, it's going to be a long year. We can both agree to that.
If you're an Eastern Michigan fan, my first question is why?
Maybe you went there. Maybe your child goes there. Maybe your grandfather went there.
Well, you don't have to admit that.
Well, I mean, I don't have to admit that I'm a Miami fan either, but I do.
Well, you seem to take pride in the pain it causes you.
I think, if you're a fan of a school, no matter why you're a fan of a school, no matter if you went there, if your family member went there, I think, the fandom level in America, I think if you're a fan of a school, you bleed those schools' colors, for good or bad, through thick and thin. And as a Miami fan, you get looked at sideways when people ask you who your college football team is. You say Miami, and you're from Northeast Ohio. So you have to explain, why are you a Miami fan? Well, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into that. But, you bleed orange and green. You bleed whatever color your school is from, and you wear it, and you wear it proud.
So why are you a Miami fan?
Growing up, my father was a Miami fan. He's a bigger Ohio State fan. However, back in the early 90s when I can first remember watching college football, Miami was a dominant school. Their swagger, their attitude, the way they played was just really fun to watch. And throughout the years, as I got older, Miami got worse, in the mid 90s when the probation era, and then when they brought in Butch Davis in the late 90s, and then the, return to dominance in the late 90s and early 2000s with Butch Davis, Larry Coker, the just magnitude of NFL talent they had. So I really enjoyed the way they played, their attitude, and just the amount of points they put up was fun to watch. And now that they're at the bottom of the pile, it's hard to watch. But still, I bleed orange and green. And as I've said at our original podcast, I may be a Miami fan, but I'm not biased. So I'm not going to sit here at all and tell you that Miami is a top ACC team when they're not.
I just always find the whole fandom curious and interesting. I don't know why. I mean, I've liked 3 teams in my life, and that was the Miami Dolphins, specifically because of Dan Marino, the Atlanta Braves, specifically because of Tom Glavine, and the Cleveland Indians, specifically because of Albert Bell. So it was a joy for me in the 95 series when it was the Braves and the Indians, but I was definitely cheering for the Braves, and it was a huge accomplishment, or I thought it was the biggest accomplishment when Glavine hit them and won the World Series MVP, and I was really, really honored to be able to meet him last year at the National Sports Collectors Convention. I'm a kind of a memorabilia collector, so to get one of his jerseys autographed and to meet with him and talk to him was kind of cool. There's the very few people that I get starstruck around. I've been privileged to be around a variety of different people in different social settings, so there's not much that really gets me nervous. But yeah, definitely talking to a guy that was one of my childhood idols was really it was really a tough time for me because I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to sound stupid, but I somehow reverted to the 9-year-old kid who sat Indian style in front of the TV and watched him pitch.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting in America where we have the social media age, and I almost feel like everybody's a fan of somebody, whether or not they know it or not. And it's okay to say you're a Browns fan, and it's okay to say you're a Steelers fan, or whatever fan a team you're a fan of. But if that specific team starts losing, still be a fan of that team.
Who I think it's best to be a fan of?
The team in first place.
Absolutely not. It's best to be a fan of College Football Pros. So you should find us on Twitter at CFB Pros. Follow us. Go to Facebook, College Football Pros. Like us. Hey, we're fun-loving guys. Maybe we'll give away some stuff as this podcast moves along and we acquire some fun stuff to run contests for. But we want to be engaged. Tell us why you're a fan of a program. Tell us why you're a diehard Penn State fan or why you're a diehard Boise State fan. Put that out there. We've just done that, and I think it's interesting, especially for me because I don't get it. I don't understand why when someone lives in Ohio they feel like they have to cheer for Ohio State.
Yeah, and I don't, and I also hate the fans that because Ohio State's doing well. I've been a fan of Ohio State forever. Bullcrap. You haven't named 3 players on that squad. You can't do it. If you're going to be a front runner, I don't want to talk to you. That is literally. I don't hate a lot of things in my life, but I hate front runners.
Yeah, my biggest pet peeve in terms of sports is when I'm posting constantly about college football and I see myself and maybe 4 other people on my friends list posting things about college football, and then the national championship comes along, and since we're from Northeast Ohio, the vast majority of the people that I'm friends with I've met in Northeast Ohio, all of a sudden my Facebook feed is just full of all the "Go Ohio State Buckeyes, yay Ohio State, I'm such a big fan." No, you're not. You didn't even know they lost to Virginia Tech because you didn't follow anything until they got to the game.
Yeah, that's infuriating to me. I mean, it literally is. It just angers the crap out of me.
This is coming from someone who I tell whenever I discuss sports with anyone, whether it's on the pro level, the college level, whatever level, I always tell them, I am a fan of players. I am a follower of players. That's who I like. I don't like a collective whole. You know what I mean? I think that if I say I'm a Dolphins fan, I don't like everyone on the Dolphins. Why am I just going to blindly root for a congregation of people, some of which I like, some of which I don't? I just find the guys I like, I follow them. If the Dolphins offense is on the field and I like Jarvis Landry, which I do, and this year I like Devontae Parker, I'll watch when they're on offense because I want to see what those two guys are going to do. But other than that, I don't really care. I just find the whole concept of why people are fans and how they're fans and when they are fans just really, really fascinating.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, I'm with you on the pro level. I follow players, guys that I like in college, especially the Miami guys, but other players that I like, in college that go to the pros, I'll follow them. But I'm not going to run out there and buy, a jersey of a team, just because they're the team. I might buy the jersey of the player because I like the player, not the team,
Yeah, there's a jersey hanging in my closet, and it's AJ Green. Do you want to know why?
Why?
I really don't know.
Well, I had a Trent Richardson jersey at one time.
Yeah, didn't you want to get that signed?
Yeah, I was going to actually get it signed by him, and then extenuating circumstances such as nightclubs and coming in late places.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Well, it's definitely interesting. It's a good subject to talk about, And to all the Eastern Michigan fans out there, don't think I'm picking on you. I use that as a natural segue to talk about something else I wanted to talk about. I'll do that plenty. I'll find any route that I could possibly take to discuss things that really aren't on schedule for that day if I think that they'll bring up an interesting conversation. I'm really trying to find more organic things that Drew and I can argue about. We've really only isolated maybe two situations that we could have like a good argument about, and we're definitely going to be doing them in the future, but we're constantly looking for more.
And I feel like as the season progresses, we're going to disagree on a lot of things because I think we both have different views on college football and fantasy football and everything in general. I think we have, and not differing views because we have to be, I think we have differing views because we are just different mindsets. And I think this is an interesting, concept to have moving forward, is that I have my views and I'm going to have a ton of points for it, and you're going to have just as many for your view, and that's going to be exciting to listen to.
Absolutely, and like I tell my girlfriend all the time, there's two sides to every argument. Someone is wrong, and then there's me. So it'll definitely make for an interesting conversation when we have our arguments.
Yeah, and I cannot wait to hear why I'm wrong. I can't wait.
Well, I mean, I've known you long enough that I basically have a journal full at this point, Drew.
That's actually a very, very good point. I'm not going to lie. That's touche.
All right, well, back to our original subject matter. We're actually coming into a point where I'm really excited because I've said this multiple times, almost every time we've recorded a podcast thus far, I mentioned that one of the teams I have a soft spot for is Northern Illinois because Jordan Lynch was one of the main people that got me into this sport. So last year they had the 99th ranked passing offense, the 17th ranked rushing offense, the 39th ranked overall offense, the 64th ranked passing defense, the 60th ranked rushing defense, the 59th ranked overall defense. They scored 31.5 points per game, and they allowed 25.6. So Drew, what do you think about this Northern Illinois Husky squad?
I think they have the potential to be one of the best, if not the best, offense in the MAC. I think Drew Hare, quarterback, is going to be just lights out this year. And I think at receiver, Tommy Lee Lewis is going to have a dominant season.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on any of those points. I mean, I know the statistics, especially the points scored to me, are a little bit of an anomaly, not just because this Northern Illinois team had been such a high-potency offense for so many years under Jordan Lynch, but also because it took them several weeks to really find their swing in that offense. They kept jumping back and forth for the first few weeks between Anthony Matty and Drew Hare, and I contest that is never, ever, ever a good thing to do. This is what I don't want to see Ohio State doing. I think there's nothing but bad that comes from it because your offensive line reacts differently under certain players. Your receivers know that they could look at a quarterback a certain way, and the quarterback can read their eyes or their hip motion or their hand motion, and if you keep switching those players out, it becomes difficult for the offense to become synchronized. I don't like it. And then finally, when they stopped putting Anthony Matty into the game, Drew Hare became a really, really strong and productive quarterback.
Yeah, he really stepped in and took that brass ring, if you will, and he really stepped into that role and played it very well. And I just don't know where their production is going to come from at the running back position this year.
I think it's Joel Bunyan. He had a good year even behind Cameron Stingley, who, even though he put up fairly solid numbers, I expected much more out of him last year. But I really expect him, you talk about brass rings, I think this is a guy who's going to step up and really prove that he maybe should have been taking some of those carries over Stingley last year. And I think at the end of the year, we'll be talking about both of these guys in very high regards in terms of their production. Now, in the receiver end, Deron Brown is gone, and that is a big shoe to fill. But this offense was also without Tommy Lee Lewis last year, so it's almost like Brown walks out and Lee can almost step in. And I don't know, they're not the same player. Deron Brown does things that no one else did at that position. And there's a lot of receivers like that. There's just guys they're guys that are just their own guys, Like, the perfect example for me would be Sammy Watkins. I was just watching the Clemson-Ohio State bowl game from 2 years ago, and Sammy Watkins was just a guy who got the ball in his hands, and he basically just looked at the defenders and just told them, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to stop running when I want to stop running.
Yeah, he was on a different level. And I think if any team in the MAC can find a receiver like Sammy Watkins, that's something special.
Yeah, I want to be careful in saying I'm not trying to compare anybody to Sammy Watkins. I'm just trying to say that Deron Brown, who's not there, he was just that kind of player who was able to create routes on his own. He was able to do things that you didn't think he was able to do. And it's going to be hard to fill those shoes, but in 13 under Lynch, Tommy Lee Lewis had a really good year, and I think there's a great opportunity for him to come in and work with Drew Hare and really bring this team into a position where they're definitely one of the strongest teams in the MAC. On the defensive side of the ball, I still think that they're going to be a middling defense. I don't know that I'm going to see a lot of increase of production anywhere. I don't think they're going to stop teams any better, but I think they'll be totally serviceable. I think when they play some of the teams that are a little higher powered, you don't want to completely look the other way. I don't know that you want to go out of your way to target players against them, but I also don't know that if you feel so strongly or if someone has been on such a roll that you want to completely not look at them just because they have a decent defense.
Yeah, I think their defense has to – I mean, they got 8 starters back. So they have some continuity on the defensive side of the ball, but I agree. I think they're good enough where you don't want to target the opposing offense. However, I think maybe middle of the season, depending on injuries, their depth is an issue for me. So if they get some guys banged up and matchups start flowing a different way, I think they're a defense you have to look at to be very, very suspect.
Yeah, and a good example of what we mean by this, where we're saying you don't want to definitely target them, but you don't want to look away. Say Roger Lewis has just been on a tear, and him and Matt Johnson just really have, they're on the same page like you have not seen another set of players before. If they go into playing Northern Illinois, even though it looks like Northern Illinois is competent at handling the pass, you don't want to necessarily say, well, they're not that bad. They're not horrible, so I don't want to target them. You need to sometimes just say, well, these other players are performing so well, and it's not like Northern Illinois is a pass-stopping offense. So that's kind of what I mean. You don't want to find a weak passing unit and say, well, they're not that great, let me test them, because that's not going to work out. But if you find a team that's coming in and they're clicking on all cylinders, Northern Illinois isn't a defense you want to stop dead in your tracks for.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I can't really add anything else to that because you just that's dead on.
Moving on, we'll go to Toledo. Toledo had the 60th ranked passing offense, the 13th ranked rushing offense, the 15th ranked overall offense, the 3rd worst passing defense in the country, the 14th best rushing defense for an overall defensive rating of 78th. They scored 36.6 points, but they allowed 30.5. So this was a whirlwind of a team last year, Drew. I think you could agree with me on that.
Yeah, I think the quarterback situation is very unsettled with Phillip Ely and Logan Woodside. And I think both those guys are very talented in their own right. But you look at the talent, you look at the defensive backfield, or I'm sorry, the running backs, and Kareem Hunt, who 1,600 yards last year. So whoever the quarterback is, just turn around, hand the ball off, and let him do his thing.
Yeah, to me, the first thing that I remember about this Toledo team was Phillip Ely getting injured, Logan Woodside coming in, and Logan Woodside getting injured, and having to rely on I think they might have even had their redshirt freshman Michael Julian come in for a very, very brief time, and I think he got hurt as well. And they ended up having to drop back to their emergency quarterback, who was one of their wide receivers, Dwight Macon. So that was an interesting scenario because on most of the fantasy sites, Macon was he was a wide receiver, and any time you have a quarterback who's going to be playing quarterback and they're at wide receiver or running back and they're cheap, you just play them. Because at the end of the day, the quarterback is the guy with the ball in his hands more than anybody else, and they're most likely to produce. They're more consistent to produce as long as they're not awful. And, he and Greg Ward last year were in the same situation where I had a couple of weeks where I was able to win just because, hey, I knew this guy was playing quarterback. He was listed as a wide receiver. Not my fault that they weren't able to switch him quick enough. I'm going to make money off of it. And you know what? Both weeks I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was in the same boat a couple times. So I think this team, if their quarterback, any quarterback can stay healthy, I think they're going to be, at the end of the season at the top of the MAC, and at least talked about at the top of the MAC. And they've got some talent on the outside with Alonzo Russell. He's a 6'4" guy. He's a tall guy that can go up and get the ball in the end zone to help the quarterbacks out. And they just got depth at the receiver position, which is good to see from a team like Toledo.
Yeah, Corey Jones on the outside is no slouch either. I'm imagining both of these guys will get closer to 1,000 yards this year, but I only think ultimately one of them will surpass it. But I think they're both definitely threats. I love Kareem Hunt. I mean, his performance against Arkansas State in the GoDaddy Bowl was absurd. I mean, absurd. I think he had like 253 and 6 scores or something like that. It was just bananas. So this guy is a producer all the way through. If he stays healthy, they're in good shape. Terry Swanson, his backup, he's no joke either. I mean, if something were to happen to Hunt, Swanson could definitely jump in there and he could produce, maybe not to the same level, but pretty close. I find them to be in a pretty good position. Overall, though, their defense, I'm a little bit, I don't know what to say, man. The D-line should be good, but man, third worst passing defense in the country, not in the conference, in the country.
Yeah, I think that number is skewed a little bit because of all the injuries they had. But that also gave a lot of younger guys some, valuable experience. So if they can get some of the injured guys back, this defense is a defense that can really improve on that number, because that is, to me, a very skewed number.
Well, you'd have to hope so, because ultimately, if they can't, they're on the wrong side of the conference to not have strong or at least stable defensive production. If they were on the other side, I wouldn't think twice about this, because both teams that we talked about in the Eastern Division, which are Bowling Green and Massachusetts, they're horrible defensively. I mean, Toledo could come in readily and probably, I don't know if dominate's appropriate, but they would definitely be the best team, in my opinion, on that side.
No, I couldn't agree more. I echo that sentiment, because the other side is very bottom heavy. When it comes, especially comes to defenses. So they would definitely be an improvement over there.
Yeah, and we'll finish this episode with Western Michigan. Last year, they had the 35th ranked passing offense, the 57th ranked rushing offense, the 41st ranked overall offense, the 49th ranked passing defense, the 48th ranked rushing defense, the 46th ranked overall defense. They scored 33.8 points per game, and they allowed 24.9. When I look at those numbers, I think that's a pretty good football team.
Oh, this team is loaded offensively, with quarterback Zach Terrell, running back Javarion Franklin, Corey Davis and Daniel Braverman on the outside. This team is loaded, and they're going to put up a ton of points this year.
Yeah, I mean, they're bringing 8 of 10 linemen back, but my concern is the starting center and right guard are 2 of the 10 that are not coming back. So that's a little bit of a concern, but I really don't know how much. I think Jarvion Franklin was an absolute monster last year. It's tough to believe that he'll have 24 touchdowns again, but I think he's going to have a great year. And Zach Terrell, in the bowl game against Army, I believe, he just looked great, and Corey Davis looked very strong. And just having all of these guys coming back on the offense, I think there's tons of production to be had. There's no reason to believe that the numbers should shift negatively. It's tough to believe that they're going to go up much more, but at the same time, I think this is a team that should definitely be able to perform close to what they did last year.
No, I agree, and their defense is good enough. In the MAC, they're a decent MAC defense. Their defensive backfield has some holes to fill, but as a whole, they should be able to step in, and those guys should be able to take over and just go with the flow in that. And they're, like I said, they're good enough.
Yeah, my big concern on the defense is losing their top cover cornerback, so that's not going to be a good thing, and that's going to be a tough replacement. But and again, what bothers me is just the fact that depending on what their schedule looks like, they may be facing a lot of pass-heavy teams, and if their DBs aren't playing at the level that they need to be, that really puts much more of the emphasis on the offense. As of right now, the offense is scoring almost 10 more points than the defense is allowing, so they've got a lot of room for error, that defense does. You never want to say a defense is okay to allow more points because the other the offense scores so much, but 10 points is a lot. I can't imagine, even with losing their top cover cornerback, that they're going to give up more than 3 points on average. So even if that jumped to 27.9, I mean, they're still in a good position.
Yeah, you never want to rely on your offense to outscore the other team, but I think a team like this, they can say that because their defense, is just good enough to allow that to happen.
So after we've profiled all those teams, Drew, my question to you becomes, in this much thicker, top-heavy division, who walks away with the crown?
I really think Western Michigan takes this, and it's them in Bowling Green in the MAC title game. So I just think that Western Michigan on offense is way too strong, and as I said, their defense is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bouncing around between Northern Illinois, Toledo, and Western Michigan, and I think that I'm going to depart from you just a little bit, and I'm actually going to say I think that somehow Toledo is going to improve enough with that passing D that they're going to surprise a lot of people and end up taking this division. And I agree with you. I think they're going to end up going on to play Bowling Green. So if we had to finalize it right now, who would be the winner of that game? If you have Bowling Green and Western Michigan, who do you have winning that game?
I think Bowling Green takes it. I really do. I think their offense, I mean, it'll be the power, matchup of two power offenses. But when you return, Bowling Green's side of the ball, when you return Travis Green and Matt Johnson at quarterback, that experience, and if they're healthy, I don't see any way Western Michigan can beat them.
I'm going to go the same route with you overall. I can see Bowling Green over Toledo. I think it'd be a close game because I think Bowling Green is much worse defensively than Toledo. But at the end of the day, I think that the skill players on Bowling Green are just slightly better cumulatively than Toledo. I think Kareem Hunt still might be the best overall player on both of those teams.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I think if you put everything together, I think that Johnson is a better quarterback than Philip Ely. I think the receivers that you have at Bowling Green are a bit better than Alonzo Russell and Corey Jones at Toledo, and I think that's really where it will come from at the end of the day. So it's good to see that at least we agree on some point of the.
That's not good for viewership. We have to disagree.
Yeah, we have to disagree. There needs to be bloodshed on this show.
Yeah, people want to see violence and disagreements and hatred and Twitter slurs and racial stuff. Let's do it. No, that's not.
All right, so if anyone has any Twitter slurs to send it, Drew, where do they send
I don't know what
them?
that is. I don't know what a Twitter slur is.
You just invented something.
I did. I think I might have. I'm going to hashtag that right on Twitter, and you can find that hashtag, and you can follow me on Twitter at CFBProsDrew. And Nick, if you want to invent something on Facebook, where would I find you?
You could find us at College Football Pros on Facebook, at CFB Pros on Twitter, online at www.cfbpros.com. For Drew, I'm Nick of College Football Pros, and we will talk to you again later.